like just trying my best to be understanding of their situation. But even though their situation had severe consequences in my life, not just financial, but mental one as well.
You are listening to the Go Earn Your Salt podcast, brought to you by Salty Electrolytes. On this podcast, your host, Riley Rogers, explores the stories of people who get after it, get things done, and earn their salt. You will hear from high achievers who discuss what makes them tick, how they got to where they are today, and where they're headed tomorrow. Perhaps this podcast will help you go earn your salt. Today I have my friend Gustavo Bessa out of Portland, Oregon, the Portland area. He's a businessman, but he's also a high-level jiu-jitsu athlete. And so I wanted to invite him on the show today. He's the owner of 3 jiu-jitsu schools. I'm going to actually have you introduce those so I get the names right of your schools, if you would. But I want to welcome you to the show, Gustavo.
Yeah, thanks for having me in, Riley. It's a pleasure to be on. So yeah, I do own 3 Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu schools in the Portland area. We have our Happy Valley location is our oldest one, or Oregon City, that's about to be 4 years old, and then our newest one that we were just reopening up. Actually, as of today, we're back in the open after a 5-month break there that we had to close down, as we will talk about later on today. But Selwood location, which is in Southeast Portland in the Brooklyn neighborhood.
Oh, awesome, man. I'm always impressed with that when someone can juggle, man. The fact that you can juggle 3 of them is crazy. You know, I don't own a school. I just train at one, but I teach there, and I can see all the moving parts, and I'm like, man, I don't know if I'd want to own one, let alone 3. So it's impressive.
Yeah, I sometimes reconsider my choices, but at the end of the day, it gets to a certain point that if you want to continue growing and continue to giving the opportunity to other people who also want to make a living off jiu-jitsu to be able to coach, you only need so many coaches in one gym. So once people get to a certain rank, I think that's an opportunity for them to practice their own coaching, regardless if they want to move on down the road or not and whatnot. It works for everybody. So it's kind of what we had to do.
I would
But
love
yes,
to
not
hear
easy.
more. Yeah, I bet it's not easy, man. I would love to hear more about the that transition. Once you said when somebody gets to a certain rank, they begin to teach for themselves and um, or at least hone that craft, right? I want to talk about that in this episode, but first I want you to tell a bit about your story. You know, where'd you grow up? What was life like as a kid, and what brought you into jiu-jitsu and then ultimately into business ownership?
So I grew up in Brazil. I was born in Brazil in 1988. I lived up there until I was about 12 years old. I was always interested in martial arts, but unfortunately, my parents, they just didn't have the time, didn't have the money for me to practice sports there. At the time, it was like karate and judo and kung fu and capoeira, which I would end up training with my cousins and my friends, but never officially in a school like that. When I was 12 years old, I ended up moving here to the United States and played a little bit of soccer. But as soon as I got a chance in high school, that we lived close enough that I could walk myself to the gym and not depend on my parents, because they're growing up immigrant in the United States. My parents always worked two jobs full time, and they just didn't have the opportunity to be able to drive me back and forth. So it wasn't until my sophomore year that I was able to get into wrestling program and finally got into a little bit of martial arts then, and ever since then I just fell in love with it. I Funny story, I went in thinking it was like WWE type wrestling because that's what I watched on TV, and I was like, yeah, I want to do that. I still, as a kid, I thought that was real stuff, and come to find out it wasn't, but it was still fun and challenging, and honestly made me successful in today, because we say after the wrestling season, like everything is easy, because you have life and everything going on during wrestling season and training and competing. And it's super hard. And then after you're done, it's like, all right, well, now it's just regular life without all the other stresses. So it's pretty easy. And then fast forward a little bit, I wrestle. And then after high school, I lifted weights for a couple years and I just kind of got bored. I was like, I'm going to college, but I feel like I'm missing something. And one of my friends, really good friends, Johnny Bartlett, he was randomly signed up to do an MMA fight, and he asked me to come watch at the FCFF, which is Portland's full contact fighting federation, the biggest one here in Oregon. And I went and watched, and I was like, huh, this looks pretty fun. I think I can beat some of these guys. And I started training, and 6 months later, I was like, I'm doing pretty well. I'm beating up my teammates, and these guys are bigger, stronger, been training longer than me. Maybe I got a talent for this. So I asked my coach to sign me up for a fight, which ended up not happening then, but a year later, I was able to fight, and then I went 7, 8 years undefeated. I was like the number one ranked amateur in the air for MMA, and ended up going pro. Ended up making 11 fights before I lost my first fight, and then ended up a few years later, I retired from MMA. Decided to focus on. I was then part owner of the gym, which used to be 503 West Coast Jiu Jitsu. I took over part ownership and switched the name over a little bit, and then continue trying to juggle fighting MMA full time as a professional and running the gym, and it got to a point where it was too much, and I decided that my brain had had enough damage. I don't want to get hit in the head anymore. I turned 30 years old, and I was like, have this great opportunity on my hands. I do. People seem to think I'm a good coach, so I was decided to focus on coaching and building the gym, which is when BTT basically was born. My coach, my jiu-jitsu coach, Diego Gamonal, he's from Texas. He's the one of the head guys out in Texas. He's got a few gyms out there as well. And I talked with him and decided to affiliate with BTT. And that's when I took over as the sole owner of the gym, and started running things. Switched up the gym from a full-on MMA gym to more of a family friendly Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu gym. And here we are, 3 gyms later, and doing it full time. Still trying to compete in the old guy masters division and managing all three things.
So you're still competing. I've seen video clips of you compete. I haven't seen full matches, but your jujitsu is impressive, man. And I'm curious from you're running 3 schools, you're competing at a high level. What does a day look like for you? How do you juggle all that stuff?
So currently, I teach about 4 to 5 classes a day, depending on the day. And I tend to be able to train in at least a couple of them. And some days, especially now, I'm 36 years old now, so I will, some days I'll do daily doubles, some days I don't train at all, some days I only do one. And yeah, I just make the best of it. I figured Roger Gracie became a world champion training with a bunch of white belts. I'm not going to be Roger Gracie, obviously, but I can keep up my training a little bit with that. That's kind of doing the best I can. Is am I training the same as I did when I was 20 years old, training 3 times a day, lifting, running at night? No, I'm nowhere near where I used to be, but I've been able to put enough in the bank that at least the technique is there. My physical athleticism is not quite what it used to be, but it's still decent.
But you brought up something there that people who aren't combat sport, in that world, don't often understand. And there is, you said Roger Gracie became world champion grappling with a bunch of white belts. Mikey Musumeci is kind of that way too, where a lot of his training partners are not as nearly as high level as him. And that was something that when I came into jiu-jitsu, I'm I'm thinking I had a friend who was competing. He was very good, but he only had a blue belt or a couple blue belts and a couple white belts to train with, but yet he would still go to these competitions and do well. What is it about that? How did you make that work for you? Because it's not like they're competitive roles. It's you're getting these grappling matches with these guys that are easy for you, but how do you up the game to make that challenging so you can learn?
So one of the things that I tell my students is like everybody's got something to offer, right? So maybe this guy, he's not a full complete fighter yet, but maybe there's one position that he's really good in. And then you have this other guy who's not great in that position, but he's great in that position. So as a higher belt, right, I have to put myself in these positions where these guys will actually challenge me. Maybe he's got a great half guard or something like that. And I'm gonna let him get to his position and then I'm gonna work out of it, and I'm gonna do my best from there. And yeah, and I've heard a lot of high level guys say as well, like you don't need to have the toughest roles in the room every time. It's really nice for black belts to have a bunch of tough blue belts that you can kind of continue working and testing out your skills and like not feel like you're fighting for your life every round and whatnot, and be able to make the mistakes and like really test things out, before you go and test them out in competition. So if I've seen other guys do it, higher level guys that have won way more than me, so I take their word for it. And so far it's been successful. I mean, the better guy in the room for, I don't know, a decade now that I've been one of the black belts in the gym as a 7 years now. And even when I was a purple belt, brown belt, I was already one of the better guys that basically living full time, and not. But I believe everybody's got something to offer. I got Big Mike, he's the king of the deep half. I got Big Sook who can put crazy pressure on top. I got this other guy who's made out of rubber bands and he can invert and play upside down. I got this brown belt girl who's super flexible and play all kinds of lasso spider guard. So I let her get into her game so I can make the best out of it. And then all of a sudden, I have all these different looks. They're giving me their best, and I'm giving them maybe not my best position, right? But still going to help me get better.
So that's beautiful because you're talking now about, and again, people not in the sport maybe don't understand, but you could have a blue belt who has a black belt position, right?
Correct.
Black belt level. And so you piece all these people together and you get a complete other fighter that you get to work out of all these high level positions.
Correct. Yeah. I just got this new kid. He's like in his 20s. He was like a green belt in judo, trained as a kid, high level wrestler, but doesn't know any jujitsu. But on my feet, man, he's giving me trouble. He's throwing me on my head, and I could be like the ego black belt that like refuses to train with him or just sits down and only does jujitsu. But I'm like going in there and I'm getting thrown on my head by this brand new white belt kid, which little do people know he's a freaking killer standing up, but once it hits the ground, he's brand new, so I get a lot more out of losing to him on my feet than I do from beating him up on my back. And I take advantage of that. I look for people's strengths and then I use those strengths to help me get better at the parts where they're better than me or as good as me or whatever they're best in.
Yeah. Yeah. Now positionally, do you get yourselves into deep into a submission and try to escape from that? Do you take that approach also?
I do it a little bit. I don't do it as much anymore because I just feel like it beats my body down. I'm more of very much focus my training on positional opposed to submission defense. I've always believed that once you're a little too late once you're in the submission locked in yet. I understand Gary's Tannen's approach, and you're getting tapped out 15 times in 5 rounds and stuff like that. And I did that a lot more when I was younger, but now I feel like, man, that's a beating on my body, getting those arm bars so close and escaping and fighting out of it. But still do it to some, just not as much as I used to in the past. Just adapting as I
Yeah.
as I age, preserving
I
my
think
body
that's a
because I
good
want to
life
do this till
lesson.
I'm 80.
Yeah, that's a good life lesson, not just for jujitsu, but for just about anything, man. Sometimes as we age, we have to take different approach to things, and that constant rough beat down, go 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 has to kind of slow down a bit, and we can pace ourselves, and then we can do stuff longer.
Right. And that's kind of where I'm starting to make that transition now, going from training super hard to managing my training and my coaching, make sure I don't break down and learn to like some days I go hard, the next day I might not go at all, and then I'm gonna go light and then I'm gonna go hard again and gauge. It's not every day hard or specific stuff. I just gotta listen to my body a little bit better nowadays.
Yeah, sometimes that's hard. It's a hard pill to swallow, isn't it? When you kind of realize, my crap, things are slowing down, and I'll be
Mhm.
48 this year, or I'll be 49 this year. Excuse me. I'm still on the mats, but man, there are days when I'm like, I went too much last night. Today's going to be slow.
I understand. Yeah, and that's my goal to keep going. Hope to make it to 49, still on the mats and having fun.
Yeah, man. Well, it is fun every time, but it's definitely a pace thing now. Um, what is for competitions and just for life in general? You can't really tell on camera, but you're a physically fit dude. What does diet and workout routine look like? That's because I imagine not all of your workout is on the just grappling.
So currently, I do about 2 days a week of weight training. I'd like to add more, but with how much I'm coaching, it's sometimes hard to get those extra 2 days there. But I do one day of upper body and one day of lower body, and that seems to be enough. I get between, I want to say, 6 to 7 training sessions of jujitsu a week. Um, I don't spend as much time drilling as I used to. I end up just kind of like jumping in for the positional and the live rows. So I'm not getting a full hour of training every time I train. It's more like 30 minutes of go time kind of thing. Um, Diet wise, I've been way more strict in the past. I felt like when I was fighting MMA, I was dieting for 10 years long, like just constantly like keeping track of calories, keeping track of my meals, and eating at exact times. As I retired, I decided that I don't want to do that anymore. It's become like it makes the sport not fun for me to have to like be at 100% peaking all year long, all the time. So I keep my dieting to where I'm eating. I try to focus on eating real foods. I'm eating 2 to 3 meals a day. Some days I fast, some days I don't. But just focusing on eating real foods, like real nutrient dense foods, no processed foods. Getting my protein intake every time, every meal that I eat, I make sure I have protein. Drinking water, pretty much only water is what I drink, and I'll drink tea in the morning. That's about it, but nothing crazy. I'm not doing what I used to do, be full on keto for months at a time, not eating any carbs for months at a time. So now it's just pretty balanced diet. Protein, carbs, and healthy fats every meal.
What weight class do you fight in when you grapple?
So currently middleweight, which is 181 and a half with the gi and 175.5 no gi.
And they take it down to a half a pound, huh?
Yeah, yeah.
Um,
That makes a difference sometimes.
yeah. Well, I think what you're talking about here, people don't understand the commitment it takes to go into a competition, especially if you're having to cut a bunch of weight. You know, that's a freaking that's difficult. And
Right.
people look at these professional MMA fighters and they're always, critical of they didn't perform today. Well, dude, you know what that guy's been through for the last 8 weeks in the camp or 10 weeks? It's brutal.
Yeah, I used to cut like 16 pounds of water weight day before my MMA fights when I used to fight at
16.
140 pounds. 16 pounds and then put 18 pounds back within the next 3 hours. So it's very hard, and to be able to do that, there was a whole process of the month long, and then the week of was very specific how much water you're drinking, water loading, when you cut off the salt so that your body just releases all that water at once. And I know for a fact that most people don't understand the weight cutting. There's a lot of guys that don't know what they're doing. They just not eating the right things, and the performance will show, but it's a very methodical, scientific way to do it properly. And even me, I had my last fight against, it was like my last fight, it was my 15th fight. I didn't have a good weight cut. I don't know if it was the weight cut or the recovery that didn't go well, but not to make an excuse. But as soon as I warmed up, I had a heart rate monitor and my heart rate was just through the roof, and I was like, uh-oh, something is off, and that's the last thing you want to
Yeah.
do right before your fight is feel that like, oh no, my weight cut went bad. I'm not feeling great. I'm going to gas out. And sure enough, second round in, I was already dying and ended up getting TKO'd for first time in my career. Lost my only fight that I didn't finish the full fight. But it's a very important thing. People underestimate the power of food and the recovery and the proper way to weight cut. Fortunately for jiu-jitsu, for the most part, we don't cut very much weight. Sometimes if you're real close, there's a couple pounds that you gotta lose. And I tell my students, like, if you have to lose more than 5 pounds, put on some weight and be at the top of your division instead. Like 5 pounds is about the limit, in my opinion, for a jiu-jitsu competition that you weigh in and then you gotta go and compete. Anything more than that, it's detrimental to your performance.
Yeah, man, I'll tell you a quick funny story. When I was a kid, I started wrestling when I was in the second grade. I was 8 years old, and I wrestled until I was 12. So I had 5 years there of in the freestyle wrestling scene. And the last year I wrestled, I was supposed to be in the 85-pound class, right? And I got the bright idea that I didn't want to fight those big guys, those big 85 pounders. I wanted to get back down to the 72-pound class, which was, that was the next one down at that time. And so I stuck a garbage bag on and a sweatshirt and went for a jog around the block. And I just ran until I was down to where I could weigh in under 72. And, that's a humongous percentage of body weight.
Yeah,
And
especially at that weight class.
oh my gosh. Yeah, I got so sick, man. I had no idea what I was doing. I just saw my older brother doing it, and I thought, I'm going to try this. And sure enough, I made weight. But I went in there and got my butt kicked because I just had nothing left. It took so much out of me. That was the last time I ever tried to cut any weight, man. It was terrible.
And I'm sure any wrestler from your generation, my generation and below, went through the same exact thing. I think it's unfortunate, in wrestling, they do a good job. I don't know how much has changed since I've been in high school, which quite a bit ago, almost 20 years now. But they don't do a good job educating you in nutrition. They don't do a good job educating in a proper weight cut. So you're kind of just on your own unless you had a family that done this before, like a wrestler family, which I didn't have. My parents never played sports. It's like the first one in the family ever to play sports, and they just don't educate you, So you're kind of out there like, oh, I saw that guy put some Albolene on his body, put through two trash cans or trash bags on, sweatsuit and sweatshirts, and go for a run like the Michelin Man, looking all chubby with the five sweatshirts on, and all of a sudden, I finished a match and I go downstairs and I fall over, cramping everywhere, and figure out like I was extremely dehydrated and didn't do my weight cut properly. And sure enough, I won the match, but I almost died after. So I'm not sure that was worth it.
No. All right, you sweaty buggers. That liquid dripping off your forehead and down your back contains minerals that are critical for high performance. If you don't put those minerals back, you're not going to perform well. This is where Salt Electrolytes comes in. Salt contains 6 electrolyte minerals plus a touch of iodine to help you replenish after a hard workout. Salt is the only electrolyte supplement to pair every mineral with its counterpart, giving you the most robust mineral profile on the market, period. Head over to goearnyoursalt.com today to get some for yourself. Use the code GOEARNYOURSALT to get 15% off your first order. And now, my friends, go earn your salt. Well, let's switch gears a little bit. I want to talk to you about how you've now navigated the business part of your world, because you're successful in competition, you're doing well there, but now all of a sudden you take on 3 jiu-jitsu schools, and they're fairly close together, if I'm not mistaken.
About between like one is 17 minutes from the other, and the other one's like 25 minutes from the other. So
Okay.
fairly close. Yeah, which I did that on purpose because I'd like to be able to go and visit all of them and not have to travel 2 hours away, stuff like that. So I can close enough that I can keep an eye, but far away enough where it's a completely different clientele.
Yeah.
They're all in different
You
cities.
mentioned you mentioned you started out with, was it called 503 jiu-jitsu
Right,
or
503 West Coast Jiu Jitsu. It's where I was an MMA fighter there. I was just one of the students, and eventually I became one of the assistant coaches. And down the road, when my coach, which is he's now my jujitsu student and one of my best friends, Jason Pittman, he got another job and he just kind of burnt out on the gym life and being a gym owner. And he offered me and 2 other guys a partnership, and we were a partnership for a little bit. All those other guys had real jobs, and I was the only one just living off the gym and trying to make the
mm,
gym work. Got to a point I was like, hey guys, love you guys, but either you guys gotta go or I gotta go and do my own thing. And they're like, no, bro, you're doing everything. We got enough money, just pay us back for what we started, and you take over. And I worked hard, got the gym running again, went from like 40 members back up to a little while back. We had close to 300 members, but I was able to pay
sweet.
them back. And I actually stayed partners with Pittman for a little bit. And eventually he was just like, bro, I don't want to deal with this anymore. You're doing great. Go ahead and just take over. Just give me a few things, pay me this a certain amount of money. And then it worked out great, and I'm still friends with all those guys and great relationship. And I think it worked out for the best. They all have their separate careers, and they're have a lifetime membership to the gym. always welcome to come in and train. Their kids are allowed to come in and train. So worked out for the best.
That's great. You mentioned him kind of burning out on the gym life. Talk about that a little bit. What do you think causes that burnout?
I think it's different things for different people. I think for him, he just it was a different time as well. It was the time where Pittman was coaching. It was a MMA fever in the region. Everybody and their moms wanted to be an MMA fighter. So it was easy to get students. People were just coming like crazy. And then that kind of died off, and he didn't really adjust into a jiu-jitsu scene where MMA died, but jiu-jitsu kind of started popping up. And yeah, he
What
didn't
year was
have the
that? You talk
credentials.
about MMA fever. What year would that have been?
Um, I'm terrible with dates. What year was we were fighting MMA where MMA was big, love? Yeah. Yeah, I think between 2009 to 2012ish was like really big. That we had so many fighters in our gym, like 40 crazy fighters in the gym. And yeah, after people started realizing, I was like, oh, this is serious business. People can get seriously hurt. It's not just for fun, you got to be all in, and to be all in, you got to make some sacrifices in your life, and a lot of people start to realize it's not for everybody, you know,
Yeah,
and
was
then it
that was
started
kind of the
dying off.
peak of like George St. Pierre and Anderson Silva, kind of that time frame, wasn't it?
Correct. Yep.
Yeah,
Kale Sonnen, which is we're from the same town here. I grew up in West Lynn. That's where I went to school as well. Mean
dude,
streets of West Lynn.
that's awesome. No, that was a time when people would have been very attracted to MMA, man, because those are some superheroes going on right then. It's one of the best times of MMA in history.
I
But
agree.
yeah,
Yeah, and then
so
I
I'm
think
sorry that was a rabbit trail, but back to the subject. We were talking about burnout
yeah,
and
and I think in my opinion, Pittman is just he had just didn't have as much help, and he didn't have the criterias. Like he was just a purple belt at the time, and it was more like we'd like to joke about it that he was an MMA purple belt, which is very different than our jiu-jitsu purple belts nowadays. You know, didn't have the people to take over the gym and be able to do that, and like able to manage the different people and stuff like that. So I think he was just like, oh, I'm working, and he does loans for house loans now, and very successful, very good at it as well. If you need to buy a house, hit up my boy Pittman. But yeah, and then he was just like, you're doing a good job, like I can't manage to do both, to be able to do my loans and run the gym at the same time. And the numbers were showing he was like a couple months behind on the memberships and stuff like that. So he asked for help, and we had a couple. Me and Bartley, my buddy that I watched at first. We came in, grew up together, training, and young guys hungry to get it working and stuff like that. So it was a good fit at the time, and yeah. But I think different people burn out for different reasons. Like I've personally have times most recently felt was like, do I really want to continue doing this? This was very painful time for us. Sometimes it doesn't always go the way we want it or the way we envision it and stuff like that.
yeah, man, you mentioned falling a month or two behind with the memberships. Now, are you referring to the billing of the membership? Is that what you're talking about?
Like paying the rent of the gym, which is usually the most expensive bill.
Yeah, yeah, by far. Um, I see those little things with small businesses of any type. It's not just school owners, but any type of small business. It'll get to where they fall behind on billing or collections, or sometimes it's just on paying bills. And before long, that snowball starts to catch up with them, and that burnout. It's almost burnout from stress, the stress of the pressure of it all, right?
Yeah, it's a combination, it's if just like any business, if the business is not profitable and you're putting all this time and work into it, and you're just seeing the money going down and down and down, you're like, why am I doing this? Like I think I remember Pittman mentioned that he was putting so much work into these people. He's away from his families on the weekends. He's going to fight shows and doing all this time away, and then out of nowhere, these guys would just leave and disappear. And I was like, man, I pour my life into this, and then boom, they're just gone like that. They lose a fight and they're like, oh, this is not for me, or this is not for me. And and that can be tiring for a coach as well. Where we in order to be a coach, we have to give a lot of ourselves into our students. And like, I mean, I spend extra weekends on coaching tournaments all day from 8 a.m. to 6 p.m. And it's not like I'm getting paid extra for that. I'm doing that out of want to see my team be successful, but it doesn't necessarily make it more profitable. I'm not getting paid by the hour kind of thing. I think down the road it pays off because the family see the value, and you like, oh, sacrificing your weekend to being over here with us away from your family. But it's not for everybody. I know a lot of coaches
Yeah.
are like, nope, I'm not doing that.
Yeah, I think there's a romanticism there, when you start into the sport, whether it be jujitsu or MMA or wrestling or anything. It's like, man, it'd be so cool to teach full time and own my own school. But there's more to it than just teaching full time, right? There's a lot of other stresses that come with it.
One of my buddies, he's actually Coach Ruben. He's my guy helping me out in Oregon City, and partially going to be in Selwood here as well. He sent me a funny, well, not a funny, but a inspiring meme this morning. It's like, oh, there's a black belt, that wish he was just coaching the class and not have all the responsibilities of emailing members and having tough conversations with students. And there's a brown belt that wish he was just that purple belt, that was just traveling around and competing and have zero responsibilities. And there's a blue belt that wish he was as tough as that purple belt. So there's always somebody above you and somebody that wanted to be like you, but and like vice versa. Like I missed the times where I was a purple belt with zero responsibilities, and all I did was train, work a dead end job that I didn't have to use any brain power. I just got by to make enough money to be able to travel to Texas and see my coach and leave for 2 weeks and not have to be responsible for anything. But obviously I love my job. I'd never want to go back and work in the office again. Like I see the value that I bring to my community, to kids, changing lives. But uh, yeah, there's pluses in every part of the step, and I think that's just a journey. You got to enjoy every piece of the journey.
Yeah, yeah. Every time you level up, it looks different, and there's things you didn't anticipate. So, I did want to ask you, since you mentioned kids and the community and that, I got to come visit you here a year and a half ago, and I happened to come by your school during a kids class, man, and you have it's an amazing kids program. Those you had an obstacle course set up, and the kids were running around, and I want you to talk about that because I think there's something that jiu-jitsu school owners know. A lot of them, especially the ones with kids programs, the kids program is a big chunk of the income that comes into a school. But it's also a very challenging uh, portion. It's one of the more challenging areas to teach. It's a lot of times, some people are cut out for it and some aren't. And you seem like you really enjoyed it, man. You seem like you're having a great time with all those kids. Talk about that a little bit.
Yeah. Well, first off, thank you. I appreciate the kind words about our program. Uh, and yeah, I'll be honest. Like when I first opened the gym, I kind of looked at jujitsu overall, and I was like, man, there's a lot of gyms, but the gyms really don't focus on the kids program. They put a lot of their power and a lot of their marketing into the athletes and the competitors. And I just had the idea. I was like, you know what? I'm going to focus 100% on the kids program. And I'm not that I don't care about the adults program, but the kids program is going to be my base. Not only are parents willing to pay whatever price for their kids to be happy, successful, confident, and like be able to protect themselves, like all the benefits that we get from jujitsu, like why wouldn't you want your kid to do that and feel like that and be the star? It's the one thing about
Mm-hmm.
jujitsu, like everybody gets to be at stars, one point or another. You're gonna be the top white belt in your division, then you're going to get your gray belt. Down the road, you're going to be the top gray belt in your division. But my background, so when I was 16 years old, I worked in a private Christian school, and I worked with kids from ages 0 to 4. Eventually, I worked for kids 0 to 12. So I've always, not always, but I spent quite a bit of time working with kids. And I've been told that I have a gift for kids. This is other people's words. Like I love working with kids. I think they're awesome. They're real, and I tell people like no other job that you go in and you're greeted with a bunch of hug and a bunch of love every time, and they're so happy. That's their favorite part of their day. So that kind of makes you feel good, opposed to in the past where I've worked in the office and you're coworkers, you walk in, they're like mean mugging you, and it's not as friendly as working with kids, you know. So I take it to heart. That's like it's the best job ever working with the kids. They're just real, you know. Just yesterday, one of my 10-year-olds told me that my mustache made me look like Eggman from Sonic, you know.
So did you
That
shave it
cracked me
because of
up.
that?
No, I shaved it because I want to keep my wife. She also agrees with her.
Oh, that's funny.
Yeah, but I kind of had it just as a joke for my recent matchup that I had a fight to win, but I think I look better without it. But it was just it was funny to have it for a little bit. But I like to look clean cut, you know. That's
Yeah.
my normal looks.
So you mentioned in your last statement that a lot of gyms really focus their advertising and their marketing toward competitors. My experience is in a typical jiu-jitsu school or MMA school environment, the amount of those people that actually the percentage that compete is a fairly small percentage, right? So
Hmm.
that's good advice I hear is market toward the majority, which is not the competitors, right? You're talking about kids program, you're talking about the hobbyist adults, guys like me, right? That are we're in it because we love it. We're not in there because we're competitive. We're not in there because we're, it's a life dominating thing for us. It's important and we love it. But from a business perspective, those categories are going to be more profitable. Is that what I hear you saying?
Yeah, right. So no parent comes in and brings their kid. He's like, "Hey, I want my kid to be a world champion." Like I get one out of 300 parents that's like that, you know, and
Mm-hmm.
and they usually don't last. Uh, but people do come in. It's like, "Hey, I'd like my kid to be a little bit more confident and be a little bit more outspoken and learn how to move and have some friends and some shoulder time and get sweaty and get a workout." That's what people want. It's not to become a world champion, you know. Some of them might end up becoming a world champion, but you'll find that out 10 years down the road if we can keep them around for that long and stuff like that, you know. But yeah, you know, like most adults, they come in and it's like, no, I don't want to compete. That sounds crazy, you know. Uh, I am a big believer that I think just because like IBJJF it has divisions for guys that are in their 50s and their 60s, even in their 70s to compete. I think it's part of the sport, but I don't think that everybody's for that. You know, some guys are there just a couple days a week to lose some weight and smile and see some people, but some guys are in there and they don't have other things going on in their life, and jujitsu might be all they got. You know, and they want to be a world champion Masters 5, which we got a few of those guys. You know, and I'm
Mm-hmm.
all about it. You know, but it's the minority of people that come in and want to compete. Most of them come in just because they want to learn jujitsu or they want to learn how to protect themselves or they heard jujitsu was cool from Joe Rogan talking about it or something like that.
That guy sells a lot of jujitsu memberships, doesn't he?
He does, yeah. I wish he wasn't a 10th planet though, guys. Send me some more guys, Joe.
Yeah, for sure, for sure. Um, what was it that originally? I guess this is sort of a question I should have asked you earlier, but what was it that brought you into the Brazilian top team affiliation?
So Uh, my coach Diego, the kind of how everything worked out, he actually ended up coaching at 503. He was traveling around the United States and then he ended up spending some time at 503. And he was the first like high level guy that I was like, oh, this guy is different. At the time, you know, you got to think we didn't have very many black belts in the region. You know, there was no DVDs everywhere easily accessible. So you have to travel to Brazil. You have to go like New York, California, or Texas to be able to find legit black belts. You know, and my coach was fresh off a Pan American Championship win as a black belt. So I was like, whoa, this is my guy right here. So for the few months that he was here, he kind of took me under his wings. I was his Uber driver, drove him everywhere. He didn't speak English very well, so I'd be translating in class for him, and I was like, that's my guy. You know, I want to be ranked under this guy, and he ended up moving back to Brazil, came back and moved to Texas. So I was able to continue being ranked under him because I was like, I want to stay ranked under this guy, you know, high level guy, very well known, respected in the community, and he was legit. I've never seen somebody so as good as him, you know. And we didn't have a black belt in our gym, so I would spend time traveling to Texas, spending weeks, months there training with him, spending a lot of private time with him, and that's kind of how it came down to that. Like, and then when I became part gym owner, you know, I was like, hey, Pittman, Like I'd like to switch up the business model and focus more on jujitsu. Our MMA team was known for being like very tough, just grindy MMA fighters, and I didn't like that image for a kid family friendly kids program. I was like, I want to rebrand and start things over and get rid of the MMA program, get rid of the striking classes, and just focus on fitness and jujitsu with a big emphasis on the kids program. And that's when it was a perfect timing. I was only a purple belt at the time when I became basically the gym owner. But at that time there wasn't anybody else. So the highest guy in the room, who's highest belt in the room, who's training, doing it full time, kind of ends up being the top.
Yeah, man, it's interesting because sometimes you'll see people criticize a purple belt that owns a school, right? And but crap, man, if you're a white belt walking in, a purple belt might as well be a multi-time world champion. He's gonna Their technique just feels so solid that you can't comprehend ever getting there.
Right. Yeah. And people think that I just need to have a black belt in the room. It's like, no, man, like you could have a really good technical blue belt that can teach you the fundamentals that's going to take you 2 years for you to learn to get to where they're not even where they are, but like partially close to where they are and whatnot. Given there's a lot that black belts bring that lower belts aren't going to be able to bring, such as the experience and the way that you're able to relate to the different types of people that come in the room. You might have this guy that I don't know, maybe just got out of prison, and you got this person who's been a millionaire their whole life, and they're going to be in the same room, and you got to be able to connect with the both of them. So sometimes being a new coach, you don't have that, but black belt that's been doing it, I'm 10 years coaching and whatnot, is going to have that experience a little bit different. But in regards to the jiu-jitsu technique, you really don't need a black belt in the room to introduce somebody to jiu-jitsu. Like there's plenty of qualified blue belt, purple belts that can do that.
Yeah, I agree. Something that people who aren't jujitsu practitioners who are watching this don't always understand is the length of time it generally takes to get a jujitsu black belt. Talk about that a little bit so that people understand when you say there was no black belts in the area, why? How hard is
Right.
it to get a
So
jujitsu black belt?
I mean, it depends who you ask. There's been some controversy recently about some guy getting in 3.5 or yeah, like
Yeah.
3.5 years he got his black belt, and he's not a judo black belt or Olympic wrestler or anything like that. So questionable. But my opinion, to be a legit black belt, and not just in your skills, but the overall knowledge, the overall ability to communicate and pass on the knowledge to different people and be able to coach a kids, a teens, and adults class, it's going to be about 10 years to be like a complete black belt ready to take your gym over and run and be successful at it.
Business owners, I want to talk to you for a second. Do you have a retail space inside your location? If so, I want you to think about something. Your customers are buying electrolytes. You know that, right? The problem is they're not buying them from you. Well, Salty Electrolytes can help fix that with their wholesale program. They can bring these sales to you in-house so that your customers get the electrolytes they love from the company they love, you. All you have to do is head over to goearnyourSalt.com, scroll to the bottom of the page, and click Apply for Wholesale. Do it now before you forget. I know your type, I'm one of you. Once again, that's goearnyourSalt.com. The link is at the bottom of the homepage. There will also be a link in the description on this video. And now, my friends, go earn your salt.
But I also tell my students it really varies. It really varies on the person, their goals, like you can't rate everybody the same way. Some guy, he might be this 57 years old guy who's just trying to train, and then you got this kid who's 17 years old and he's been training since he was 4 years old, and that's already 13 years old, but he's only a purple belt now, and you have a older guy who's been training for 5 years and he's a purple belt as well. So one of the first things my coach told me was like there's black belts, and then there's black belts, there's different levels of black belts, and depending on who you are and what your goals are, you're going to be a different person. I've given out blue belts in 6 months because these kids were phenomenal. This guy came in, he was super good, smart. He's putting in daily doubles every day. He's going home, he's studying DVDs, and then he just lives the lifestyle, And of course, he's going to get better than the guy that comes in twice a week for an hour. Like it's 12 hours a week versus 2 hours a week. But doesn't mean that the guy that's given 2 hours a week doesn't have enough knowledge to be a blue belt. It's just that the other guy might become one day a world class black belt if he continues that pace.
Yeah. Yeah.
So it
Yeah.
really
So much
varies,
of it is based on knowledge, right? Because there are other factors such as age, such as, you know, if you're if you're a 100-pound female, it's going to look very different being a black belt than it is if you're a 200-pound 30-year-old jacked male, right?
Right.
Um,
Yeah, and it's just different people, different goals. This person might just want to learn the moves and know jujitsu, and this person might be trying to be a world champion. I might even hold the world champion a little bit longer so he can get more experience in that blue belt. Like I got some kids that I've been training since they're 6 years old, and they're still blue belts. They've had 11 years of training, but they're not quite of the world class level, and they want to be world champions. So I'm holding them, while they can go and easily beat up some of my brown belts that didn't start as kids and stuff like that. But it's not just about beating people up in jiu-jitsu. It's the overall knowledge.
yeah. You mentioned the ability to teach, to translate the concept of jujitsu to another person. Talk about that in the. Do you do you have your students begin teaching at a certain belt level?
Um, I don't force them to teach, but if they want to teach, I give them the opportunity. So a lot of my younger guys is like, "Hey, I want to have my own gym one day. I'd like to learn how to teach." I'm like, "Well, where the best place to start? It's kids class, because if you want to have a profitable gym, you most likely is going to have to run a kids program, and kids are the hardest to train, I believe. Like if you don't know how to do it, it's very hard. Once you figure out, it's super fun, enjoyable, and not hard at all. But people, I remember when I first started, and I tried to coach 3 to 5 year olds, and I'd be sweating every class. It was like, man, this is very hard. And 10 years later, I got it down where it's super easy. I'm able to dictate tasks to my coaches. I'm able to train my coaches so they know how to coach appropriately. And now it's easy. But yeah, I have guys that are blue belts and they're assistant coaches, and I tell them like once you're a purple belt, you can basically cover for classes when the coach is gone temporarily. When you're a brown belt, you might be able to run your own program. When you're a black belt, if you'd like to partner up with me and open your own gym, we can do it. If you'd like to go open your own gym outside of our brand, it is what it is. I'd always want to keep people in the team, but just make sure you go far away so we're not competing with each other.
Yeah, for real. Well, you mentioned in there that having a kids program is pretty imperative if you want to have a profitable gym. What other advice would you give school owners that would? What other advice would you give them that would help them to grow? Just business strategy type advice.
Um, You have to focus on developing people. Like coaching a kids class is hard, especially if you don't have assistant coaches. So there has to be a good ratio of student to kids, right? So we try to do with our little kids, our 4 to 6 year olds, one coach per 4 kids. That's the most. So if we have
Yeah.
16 kids, I need to have at least 3 coaches in there kind of thing, right? And it gets a little bit more kids. The older they get, they need a little bit less attention. But that's really important, making sure you have a good program. Otherwise, it's just chaos in there, and it's hard to manage a bigger group. Just kind of like how it is in school. They're divided by grade level, by age level.
Yeah.
In our program, we like to divide by skill level and by age as well. So we have the beginners class and we have an advanced class, and then we have a younger kids class and an older kids class, which is very hard at first when you have a brand new gym. But as that gym grows, you have to adapt. You have to add more classes. And to be able to add more classes, you have to have more coaches because one guy can only coach so many classes a day. So
Yeah.
that's a really important part, and just focusing on that and training and make sure you continue your education. Uh, I've I spent a lot of time like reading and studying different programs. There used to be this very famous program that I used to study, like Jiu Jitsu Kids Online or something like that. It's where I learned a lot of the different strategies and how to work with different ages. And then one more thing, it helps my wife. who's also a black belt and helps me run our Oregon City gym. She's got a master's degree in child development, so I've been able to bounce ideas off of her and learn how to communicate with kids properly with the different ages and stuff like that. So I think that's huge.
Yeah, so you're talking you're constantly refining your teaching technique because
Absolutely.
I found, man, teaching's it's a whole different art form. And it also, though, applies in any business. It's not just jujitsu schools. You know, you're teaching the art, but you're also, man, if you're not refining your skill level and your leadership abilities and your understanding of the situation, you're failing as a business owner. Would you agree?
Yeah, no, I definitely agree. Just like any business, you got to adapt with the times, you know. Back in the day, jiu-jitsu was made for tough people. If you're not tough, get out. You're not going to make it, you know. And nowadays, you know, I had a talk with one of my coaches recently. I was like, listen, bro, you came from an MMA, a wrestling, a football background where like you can tell people to you got to work hard, otherwise you're out of here kind of thing. In jiu-jitsu, you got to meet where they are. It might be that this guy never becomes tough, and that's okay. You know, we're going to meet them where they are, and we're going to get them to where their potential is, you know, and their potential is going to be different than the other guy's potential, and that's okay. And that's one of the things that we've had to adapt. I think all the business school, you know, like it's not just about being tough anymore and being the best in the room. It's like, all right, you know, like we got to get everybody to their full potential and get like understand that it's not just about being tough. It's about kind of growing together and getting to where you individually is going to get to.
Yeah, I've heard people use the term, you know, it's not about whether or not you can beat up everyone else in the room. It matters whether or not you could beat up yourself a year ago, right?
Correct. Tell them all the time. Like the guy now would beat up the guy from 6 months ago. I guarantee that.
Yeah, for real. Um, let's talk about this because we in the before we started recording, you and I kind of briefly discussed some transition. You had a couple team members that were pretty vital part of your team step out and move to a different school. I take it outside of the BTT umbrella. I don't know for sure, but you'll speak to that. But what was that like for you? Because every business owner has team transition happen, right? And that's difficult, man. What Tell us about the situation as much as you feel comfortable, and then what that was like for you as a gym owner.
You know, that's going to be tough for everybody. You know, it was very tough for me specifically. You know, um, just like kind of caught me off guard a little bit, you know, and I wasn't expecting, really had big plans of growing together and I thought everything was great. And then it just hit me like, whoa, what? You're not only leaving, but you're leaving to go right next door, 10 minutes away from where you're coaching, which, you know, no business owner, like, yes, I'm going to be
Mm,
happy for them that they're transitioning and it's going to be good for them, but I don't want that to be in my expense. Like, you're going to take 60% of my clients and like, leave me without coaches for the time, you know. But as a business owner, you know, that can happen, you know. Like sometimes it's you're in disagreement with things, or it's just maybe a better opportunity for them and whatnot, and they had to go, and I was left to kind of scramble with three gyms and losing two of my highly valued coaches, you know, and stuff like that. Uh, it was pretty rough for a few months. You know, I ended up having to close my Cellwood for 5 months because I just didn't want to just throw anybody there. You know, I wanted to make sure the people that I put in there are qualified and well trained and that I trust, you know, because I don't like to
mm-hmm.
just put any, like I know some gyms that would just post on Facebook, oh, we're looking for this coach, this and that. And I just feel like that's a lot, you know, like I've worked very hard to build the name of my brand, to build my reputation. I'm very well known in the region. Everybody knows who I am. So I'm not going to just put anybody there and have them working with kids and stuff like that. So it has to be some people that are very close to me that I trust, you know, with my own kids and stuff like that. So it took a minute for me to get these guys caught up and trained and whatnot. So like I said, we're getting ready to reopen now, but it's tough. You know, imagine paying rent for 5 months and not getting any profit from the gym. You know, that's going to break any business. So all the profit that I made from my other gyms was going into paying for that gym that I had to close down completely, and then lost 60% of the members in my other gym, which was brutal, you know. But fortunately, it seems that everything is working out for everybody. I think they're doing okay. my gyms are starting to pick up again and getting back in the track. The students are getting used to the new coaches and stuff like that. But it's a very difficult time, like we put a lot of time into people's, like, that's part of what I was telling later. People get burnt out, and I was like very, very sad and heartbroken for a little while. I was like, man, I can't believe, that they would just leave and stuff like that. And I put a lot of time into them, many, many years training, helped them get to where they got. And then they're just like, all right, we're out, and I was like, dang, now what? But like, talked to my coaches, talked to Murilo Bustamante, my coach Diego. It was like, well, welcome to the team. Everybody that's been a gym owner has been through this before, and if they haven't yet, their time will come as well. It's just kind of the industry, I guess. You want to train people to be so good and as good as you, and you hope that they're going to continue doing well. You always want them to stick by your side, but it doesn't always happen. They sometimes don't have the opportunity to do it themselves, so they have to go with somebody else, and somebody else sometimes might be right next door to you, and we just got to live with it. It's unfortunate, and it's sad. I miss having them in the team, but what can you do?
Yeah, man, I think that's a healthy perspective because, every, again, it's not just jujitsu schools, right? It's any business goes through that where there's a
Right.
leadership change or someone starts their own version of the same thing, competing business or whatever, man. Someone, I mean, God forbid someone passes away and you lose a leader that way. There's all these ways that can happen that are, gosh, it's emotional, man. It digs deep. And what have what have you done as far as just dealing with that emotion?
Um, really kind of trying to avoid it, like just trying as my best to be understanding of their situation, but even though their situation had severe consequences in my life, uh, not just financial, but mental one as well. So just as best as I can, trying to look at the positive sides of it, and like what the best outcome, what I can do from now. I try not to dwell so much on the past and what I could have done, could have been, or on more focusing on, like, all right, now what am I gonna do now? So I just bite down and trying to work as hard as I can and be the best coach I can be, and continue providing a great product and continue training the next generation so they can continue to help me. And maybe one day, they decide that they want to continue partnering up with me, or we'll go from there, but I don't know like what much I can do, other than accept the fact and continue working, continue moving forward.
Well, I'm pretty impressed, man, because you mentioned in there that you had gone to some mentors and asked them, gosh, how do I handle this? And they gave you some good advice. It's just like, hey, man, this happens to all of us, and we've all felt it. We've all been there. You're going to get through it. And then it sounds like you've just taken a very healthy perspective. It's like, yeah, it hurts. It I've got some pieces to pick up. I'm going to be walking with a limp here for a little bit, but crap, we're going to get through it, and we're going to come out the other side okay. It's just going to take some time. And you're not, I've seen in the especially the business world, where there's sometimes a lot of drama behind it, and you haven't shown that. I know in your heart you probably felt a lot of drama, but it's you haven't shown that publicly, at least as far as I've seen.
Yeah, I don't think it does anybody any good, like I don't think, um regardless of the consequences of what happened, I don't think they're malicious people, that they were like they want to take me down or anything like that. I just think that they made a decision that was going to benefit them, and like I said, like it's not the first time, it's not the last time. Like in the last few years, I've had six different coaches leave. A couple, like five of them, started and got their own programs. And part of that is like, cool, I'm doing my job right. I'm producing talented coaches and talented people who are going out there and doing the thing that they're supposed to be doing. Obviously the business side is like, dang it, now I got to replace them, I got to put somebody else there. But I think that's the nature of any job. Like I had a talk with one of my very successful friends. He's like, construction business, you go and teach this guy everything, all of a sudden he opens a construction company as well, and now he's your competitor. And it's I'm not sure if there's a way around it, like, I guess I'm still learning, I'm not perfect. I can't say I know it all, so I'm still seeing how to do everything, like I look to my friends and my mentors and people like Murilo, who's been doing this for a lifetime, and try to get the best advice as I can, and my coach Diego as well. But I don't know if anybody really has an answer in the jiu-jitsu community, or like what's the exact way that's going to work for every single person. It's just different people have different goals. I don't really think there is.
Yeah, no, I don't think there is a way around that in any business, right? You're going to have turnover. Things are going to happen that are hard, and that's just part of it. And we have to develop that muscle, get used to it.
Yeah.
Can we switch gears a little bit and do some lighter stuff? We're kind of starting to run into a little bit of a time, and I want
Before I
to take
start
about
crying
10
in
minutes
here.
here if we can. What's that?
Before I start crying in here.
Yeah, no, I hear it, man. I don't want to dig into that because business owners, we've all felt it, man. And it doesn't matter what type of business. Hey, has all that talk about salty electrolytes made you wonder what all the fuss is about? Have you thought that maybe one day you'd like to try that stuff? Well, today's your lucky day because Salty Electrolytes is offering free samples to listeners of this podcast who have not yet tried this amazing electrolyte supplement. All you have to do is head on over to goearnyourSalt.com and use the code PODSAMPLE at checkout to receive your free sample kit. There will also be a link in the description of this podcast. And now, let's get back to the show. But real quick, who's your favorite grappler? Can be
Oh
an MMA
man,
fighter too, man. Favorite fighter, whatever.
man, people ask me favorites. I don't have a favorite anything. I don't have a favorite caller. I don't have a favorite song, favorite movie. I admire different people for different reasons, like I'm a fan, like I've spent a lot of time reading and listening to the greats, like best tennis player, or like Andre Agassi, or Mike Tyson, or George St. Pierre, or just the top of. I admire people that are the best at what they do, and the drive that they have, and stuff like that. I'm not necessarily like have a favorite fighter or a favorite coach or anything like that. I'm not a fanboy, but in that sense, I admire people for who they are, but I'm not fanboying over anybody. I like guys like Roger Gracie, Marcelo Garcia, GSP, Anderson Silva, Jose Aldo was one of my big guys. Of like, oh wow, I want to fight like that guy, But there's a lot of guys like John Jones, great fighter, maybe not as great human being. I don't know him personally, but at least what media seems to convey, But there's just so many talented people out there, and I just admire the greats in whatever sport it may be that they're great at.
Yeah, man, world class athletes. You've had a taste of what it takes to be that, and man, I have such a massive respect for those guys and what it takes behind the scenes. And like you said, we only see what the media says about certain people, but we don't see what else goes on in their world, right?
Right.
What is a what's a book you would recommend everyone read? You mentioned you're a reader earlier.
Um. Oh man, I think it really varies depending on the point of your life. I've had a lot of self-help books that were good. I like Malcolm Gladwell a lot. Tipping Point, is a great
Mm-hmm.
book. Um, I like Paulo Coelho. It's very inspiring. The Alchemist is probably that might be one of my favorite books. But I've also liked Mike Tyson's autobiography, Oscar De La Hoya biography, George St. Pierre biography. Like I'm. I mean, even Matthew McConaughey's biography, I was really enjoyed reading that book to see like his perspective in becoming an actor, and how everybody's life is a little bit different. So I don't have like specific book recommendations. Just it's going to depend on where you're at in your life and what you kind of need. But I do like the self-help books, biographies as well. Focus more on real books opposed to fiction, although the Paulo Coelho ones are very good.
I think you're the second
Brazilian
person to
author.
mention Matthew McConaughey's book in on this podcast. So yeah, maybe take some for the audience. Take some advice and read his stuff. It's good.
Yeah,
um,
it's entertaining, but very inspiring as well.
yeah,
Just a
yeah,
different
for
world
real,
that I have no clue about.
for real. What's your favorite pastime outside of jujitsu?
So I like traveling, partially why I got into jiu-jitsu was I saw my coach. I was like, what? You do jiu-jitsu and you get to travel the world? Like, this is awesome, and I've always wanted the job. Out of high school, I wanted to work for Nike because I was like, oh, maybe I'll get to travel the world and stuff like that. So that's probably my favorite thing is just traveling and going to castles and just experiencing different cultures and different countries and the different ways that people live. When I'm at home, I really don't do much. I spend a lot of hours in the gym, either coaching or just socializing with the people at the gym. I come home, I eat, I do my duties, my laundry, watch the million geese that we have, and then I'll watch a little bit of TV at night, mixtures of everything you can think of, but that's about it. I really don't do much, when I'm here. I'm kind of focus on the gym lifestyle. And I don't know if it's because I've been fighting or being an athlete since I was 16 years old. So most of my life I've been very disciplined and I'm not so much partying. I am not, I didn't develop too many hobbies because I was all in. If you want to be successful in the sport, trying to be a professional athlete, you got to be all in. You got to put everything else aside, and I guess just got used to that lifestyle, Might go on a hike here and there, but the fact that I have to do so much physical work already at the gym, I'm already socializing all day long that when I'm not, I'd like to be home alone, quiet with my wife and my cats.
You mentioned something that is kind of funny to me is the washing all of your geese, right? I in our jujitsu commercial for Salty Electrolytes, we have a scene in there of somebody putting their gi in the laundry, and people ask me that, they're just like, "Why did you put that in there?" It's like, because it's a major part of jujitsu. You have no idea how much laundry we do.
Right. Yeah, a lot every day.
Oh my gosh, man. Um, have you ever been in a fight outside of the ring?
That's funny. I tell that story to my students all the time. I was like, nope, I am never been in a fight outside of the ring. I'm a very non-confrontational person. Like I don't like confrontation, which sometimes I think like, how did I become a freaking fighter? Like I don't like fighting at all. Like outside of when I was a little kid and I got in a couple scuffles with my cousins, who I love dearly, but not really, never have been in a fight. I tell a story. I was in middle school and I almost got into a fight where we pushed each other and then I ended up in the freaking with the like in the counseling office, like crying over the whole thing. I'm just not a fighter in that sense. And look, I've always been an athlete. I don't like fighting. I don't like conflict. And I'm always scared of I'm going to get in trouble and go to jail and something like that. And especially after I started fighting professionally, I was like, no way I'm going to fight for free on the street and like risk getting in trouble. Like, you want me to fight? Pay me, you know?
Yeah,
But yeah,
man. I
I'm not a fighter like that.
I hear that a lot. I've talked to three people this week that question's come up for whatever reason, where somebody goes, you guys train jujitsu or you're in the MMA scene, and do you does it make you just want to fight? And like, not even close, man. And everyone I've talked to says the same thing. They're just like, no way, this is not appealing at all. Let's do it for sport and it's fun, but we could if we had to, but God forbid we
Yeah,
have to.
like yeah, I got the skills and I just hope I never have to use it, and I'm more likely to walk away and run than have to fight people. And that's part of becoming a good martial artist and having the confidence to be able to walk away. That's the best fight you get. It's the one that you don't get into, like that's how you win the fight because win or lose, you're gonna hurt somebody, you're gonna get in trouble, or two, they're gonna hurt you and you're gonna be all broken. Like it's a
Yeah,
lose-lose when getting fights outside of the gym.
absolutely. Yeah, I always tell people my number one guard is my triathlon guard. I'm going to swim, bike, or run, whatever it takes to get out of that situation.
Uh,
Uh, what's the scariest moment you've ever had? A near death experience? You ever had one?
yeah, I've had a couple. Um, had a couple when I was swimming once in the ocean and it just kept pushing me farther and farther away. And I was waving to my parents and they're like, "Oh, he's so cute. Look at him over there boogie boarding." And I was like, "No, come save me." Like I keep getting pushed further and further away. And that was a little bit scary. Had another time I fell off a roof and like hit my hip on the sink. Fortunately, and I think that saved me because it didn't hit my head and I didn't fall straight into the floor. So that kind of
Hmm.
saved the impact. But I did have a really close one and I was pretty small, probably like 10, 11 years old when I was still living in Brazil before I moved up here. And I was just swimming in this kind of river that was a nice calm river, but at the very end of it, it became like a stream into this other giant strong river that killed people all the time. And the river was calm, and all of a sudden this current came and started taking me away. And like I wasn't a great swimmer. I'm still not a great swimmer, so I don't mess with water anymore, you know. But that was a very close call. I remember like I started yelling for help, and one guy threw me a couple floaties, and I was able to grab onto the floaties and pull myself out, grabbing into some trees that fell. And I threw the floaties back into him, and he didn't catch it, and the floaties just went down the river, and he wanted me to catch it. And I was like, no, no way, you know. And that was very scary. That's about the closest I had, you know. But yeah, that's the one. You know, I still
Oh
remember it to
man.
today, and I'm not about the river life anymore. You know, I like the pools, just sitting down and chilling, maybe a little bit in the ocean, but not even that deep.
Yeah, I hear you, man. Um, well, tell me this: what's a bucket list challenge? What's something that you want to do before the end of your life?
Man, on my bucket list, I have this little map on my wall. It's just all the places I've been. You know, I think I've counted like 23, 26 different countries. I want to go as many as possible. You know, I'd like to check out so many more countries. I haven't been to Asia yet. Well, real haven't been to like Japan type part Asia. I've been to Turkey, which is part Asia, part Europe, but almost feel like it doesn't qualify because it's so close, you know. So got to check out the continents and keep traveling the world. That's kind of my bucket list, really.
Nice. Um, when you hear the term "go earn your salt," you know we both happen to be sporting the t-shirts today. Appreciate you wearing that, man. You look good in it. What does
Uh,
that term mean to you?
it just means you got to go put the work, you know. It's like you can't be taking your supplements if you're not working for it. So you got to go put in the work. And then after you put in the work, you got to recover. Make sure you're good to go again. All your electrolytes are back in place so that you can go put in the work again.
Next, tell me this: where can you be found?
So you can find me on Instagram, Bonsai Bessa. You can find me on our YouTube channel, Brazilian Top Team Oregon. I'm also on Facebook, Gustavo Bessa, my real name. Uh, yeah, and obviously any of my gym names, BTT Happy Valley, BTT Oregon City, BTT Sellwood. I got a few other Instagram pages, my Bonsai Army, which is like a highlight page for some of my competition and some of my students' competition. And then, yeah, our YouTube channel, I've actually got like probably 5 months worth of free technique in there that I've been uploading from every day on my classes the last 5 months. We're getting ready to set out a database with all the techniques for our students, so add a little bit more value to our community.
Oh, that's beautiful, man. Yeah. Well, listen, we'll put all those social contacts in the episode description. Okay.
Sounds good. Thank you so much.
Awesome, man. Well, Gustavo, I sure appreciate you coming on, my friend.
Hey, thank you so much for having me. This was actually pretty fun, you know, feeling pretty good talking with you. So thanks for having me and letting me share a little bit of my story.
Go earn your salt, my friend.
Thank you. Likewise. Come and visit
Awesome.
soon.
Hey, you've just finished up this episode, and I want to know, are you or someone you know a getting after it, go earn your salt type of person? If so, message me directly on Instagram at the Go Earn Your Salt podcast, and perhaps we can have you on the show. Also, if you like this content, leave us a review, subscribe, and share with your friends. And perhaps this podcast can help you and them go earn your salt.